I'm going to start to introduce our panels, because we do have a very intimate environment today. So I do want each one of you just introduce a little bit about yourself. I heard like we have a high school student entrepreneur. Definitely, like we definitely want to start there. Who's that? Can you raise your hand? Yes, very nice. Yeah, maybe like if you want to start.
Yeah,
sure.
Of course. Hi everyone, my name is Melanie, and I'm a high school student. A few years ago, I started MHS Innovations, which is a local business, LLC, that aims to help support local nonprofit organizations in their technology. So I have about 15 to 20 clients that I work with locally just to help with their technology gaps. Recently, I actually started a nonprofit organization called Girl Tech Boss. At my school, I'm part of the robotics club, and I realized that there's 66 members total, but there are only 3 girls. Only 3 out of 66 people are women, and I was so shocked by this that I felt like I needed to do something, and that's where I started Girl Tech Boss, which basically tries to help and empower girls to follow STEM and entrepreneurship. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me, and I'm very excited to hear from the panelists today.
Cool. Thank you so much. This is the first time we got our members to actually introduce themselves, and you guys are so amazing. I'm so excited to actually meet all of you here. So I'll just go over here and to start the panel. And Jamie, you can give the camera to didnt. Yeah, sure. So thank you so much for being here. We're very excited to have you all. So we always start our panel with the question 3W. So what do you do? What's your name? What's your company? And what do you do? Yeah, so maybe we'll
Sure. So I'm Lenora Cantor. My company is called OfELearning, which I started a little over a year ago. And what do I do for I'll give you a little bit of background. I worked at Bloomberg for 17 years before starting this company, running marketing there for about 12 years, using a lot of data analytics. And in Bloomberg, it's a sales kind of company, business to business. So it's a lot of sales operation data, I would say, more than even digital marketing. So that was my background. And in there, I used games to educate clients and salespeople. And as a gamer myself, I was always blown away that these tools are, these products, games, are very addictive. They always teach you. Every game is just teaching you some mechanic that you repeat ad nauseum to like achieve something, like every level, everything, right? It's always teaching you. So why can't that be used to teach, more rigorous subjects? So I started a company to do that for high school algebra and launched a product, and I'm also doing it for corporate education for sales training.
Great. Hi everyone, I'm Lenora Cantor. My business is Growth Warrior, and I work with business professionals and business owners that are looking to grow through their leadership. So a lot of my work is coaching founders and individuals in transition that are looking to grow professionally. And my background in terms of how I work with companies, which continues to evolve, is I actually just want to step back and say it's kind of neat to see all the links. So I have 20 years in financial services, Thomson Reuters, many other financial organizations, so I know this speaks fairly well. And I also work with a lot of companies on aligning their organizations around their business strategy, messaging, brand, and culture, because I think that's really the key to growth when the inner, outer, and interpersonal are all aligned.
So I'm Faye. I co-founded MarTechApe a year ago, and before that, I was a senior data analyst at Group M. And so basically, I think that the video actually tells a very good story about MarTechApe, but I'm going to just give you some extra information about what we do. So basically, we are teaming up with industry experts on creating courses to help the international Chinese students and Chinese young pros working in the US to help them to acquire the knowledge and skills that are necessary for them to succeed in the data-driven business world.
Nice. So we'll also we'll just go like that, start with Faye. So why did you start the company?
So as I said, before MarTechApe, I was actually a senior data analyst at Group M, and it's more of a media management consulting role. So what I did is that I utilized advanced analytics, especially econometric models, to help my clients to understand better what's impacting their sales, their brand health, and why some sort of media channels are more effective than the others, at driving certain business KPIs and also what the maximum incremental sales could be if we optimize the total media budget allocation. So from that job, I actually had a chance to observe closely about the major change that had been happening in the marketing space. So the marketing space had been growing more and more technical and fast-paced, and so what now it defines a prepared marketing professional is quite different from 10 years ago. So technology, data, and analytics are becoming the essential skills for people, like for almost all the roles in the marketing team, I will say. So in this situation, how can marketers at each stage of their career to keep up a constant stream of the new and essential skills? So I didn't see any promising, great, or existing solutions in the market to solve this problem. So my co-founder Joy and I were thinking about maybe we could do something to create values for these people. So what we do is, because as we are both having experience in designing training materials for those non-stats marketing people, we decided that maybe we could produce some of the courses on different marketing technology techniques to see whether this can help the marketers to relieve their pain. So what we do at MVP stage is that we created some part of like initial courses that we have, including like programmatic buying, digital attribution, marketing mix modeling, A/B testing, etc. And we released these courses to our initial clients. And what we found out is that it turned out to be very successful courses, and they liked it very much. They are asking more about that from us. So we decided to turning this, asking their feedback and kind of make some change and iterations to improve the learning experience. And we further also created project-based boot camps so that the learners can learn by doing. And since launching, we've been hearing from our users how they love the courses and how they literally apply what they learn from the courses to their daily jobs, just as what you said and what you saw in the video, right? So at that point, we decided to make this into a very serious business.
Nice. And Lenora, why did you start the company?
So I spent 20 years in the corporate world in a number of executive roles. I had helped take a company public. 6 months later, they were acquired by Thomson Reuters, and I really like working with high growth companies. So when you start with a company and it's about 100 people and then it doubles in size to 200, that's really different than working in an organization with 50,000 people. And I was sort of a year into the integration, and I realized that there really was more consolidation going on than growth, and I had always wanted to start my own company. And I thought, if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? So I basically have been on my own for about 5.5 years, and I love it. I enjoy working with companies, but I also like having my own business. It's got a lot of its own unique aspects. So it's sort of funny because I was also a marketer and I act as an outsourced chief marketing officer for companies. But when you have your own business, you're also the CTO, the CFO, the head of sales. Everything comes down, and not all of us are really good at everything. And so it's really it's a process of learning what your strengths are and sort of figuring out how to build your business in a way that makes sense for you. So one of the other hats I wear is that I coach a lot of founders. I do mentoring through a number of different startup accelerators, and I went to Columbia Business School. I do a lot with startup founders there. So I also have the perspective of having worked with a lot of founders to sort of see what it is that it takes for them to start. But usually some people are solving a problem, and other people are following their passion, and I think that's kind of the camp that I fall.
Yeah, I think I might have jumped the gun on this question from before, saying that as a gamer, I saw this gap and wanted to address it. But I will say that, maybe I'll answer, why didn't I start it sooner? I started this thing, the idea was in basically 2012. Then I went to business school and even explored it there and found there seemed to be a real market as far as business planning can predict anything. And the opportunity was, I was really looking to solve the problem anywhere. So I used my position at Bloomberg to develop these games and see how they work, and saw the success there. I also learned very quickly that the biggest challenge, especially if you try to iterate in a lean way, is if you're not the developers kind of own you. Like they'll tell you, you want a little feature, a little button here, great, that's 2 weeks. And what can you do? So I started to teach myself how to code and teach myself how to make these games. And when I got the knowledge base, then I felt comfortable enough to at least be able to drive this way. When I meet a principal, when I meet a teacher, when the students give me a feature they want, I know what it really takes to get it done. And that was like that big moment where I said, okay, I could try to build this.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like we're right here in the NYU Game Center, and gamification is a huge thing in the space. So like, what kind of game? Just like, can you help us to like visualize like what actually you guys are providing?
Yeah, so the game for algebra is already on the App Store. It's called Algebra Tycoon. And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get students to engage with a high stakes exam. Right, so these are for students who struggle. The algebra exam, for example, in New York State, required to pass high school, and the city has a 34% fail rate. Right? Principals lose their job over this thing if the scores don't improve. So people with the money care, there's a real issue, and there's, these students are the real victims here because they don't have enough support. Not everybody can afford great tutors.
Yeah.
Right? So what this does is it takes the exam and it puts a lot of the questions and simplifies them into the game. And then it creates a rich game environment where they're investors. So they invest and they keep growing their businesses across those 21 different businesses. And they get to see how algebra applies to the businesses. And it's competitive, there's leaderboards, all these things to keep them engaged.
Yeah.
So I'm using every dirty trick I know in mobile gaming to get them to come back. So it's on their phone, it has alerts, there's like, if you come back every day, you get more items to use.
Yeah.
We're gonna add avatars, is a big thing people ask for.
I'm sure.
So yeah, so it's really using gamification as software motivation.
Nice.
That's the key angle.
Nice. I hope like more people are actually on your app instead of Snapchat.
Yeah, it's tough. When you're on their phone, you're also competing with all the other apps.
Yeah.
So as much as it's convenient, they get an alert from another app that so then you lose them. So it's something I'm trying to adjust for.
Nice. And since you guys all touched about like what did you do before the startup, so like what actually surprised you? Like before starting this venture, you're a data expert, you're a CMO. Like what surprised you like when working in your own thing, like in your own venture? Yeah. So maybe we can start with you, John.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's I would say there may be two things. Number one is you have unlimited distractions when you're running your own business, because everything could be an opportunity. Especially once I knew how to make these apps, it's like, oh, what can I solve? There's so many things to solve. So it's very hard to stay focused. You can easily get distracted at Bloomberg, right, where I used to work, with all the initiatives you could do. But once you pick an initiative, you're kind of mandated to execute on it. So you have your CEO kind of, making sure you stay in line. When you're on your own.
Bloomberg.
Yeah, well, no, not exactly. He wasn't. He was a couple of steps beyond. But so you're responsible to a bunch of different stakeholders. So you stay focused, which is great. When you're on your own, you're responsible, especially a year in. There's so many opportunities to make revenues. You just always want to explore everything, but you really can't and shouldn't. You have to try to focus. So that would be number one. And number two, it's really at Bloomberg, at the company I used to work for, it was very well established, and it had a direct sales channel that always worked. It's the salespeople. Like it just worked. We tried to use different other tools like online. We tried to use better marketing tools, direct marketing. Nothing that delivered the best ROI compared to like enabling the salespeople. So you have that channel, you focus on it, you do that for like 12 years, right? And you start a business and you think, oh, I'm going to make an app. I could prove that it helps students. Let me just get some principals on the phone.
Yeah.
They don't answer the phone. They don't even open emails. So it's a fight. I feel like I'm exploring different channels and learning about these other channels that I'm not an expert in. And you just have to explore every one of them. It's a whole other business. So you have a business for your product. They need to iterate to make sure it works well. And then you have a whole other business. You have to figure out how do you get this to the people that need it. The fact that it helps them doesn't really mean anything. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to say exactly the same thing, but I'm thinking that. I mean, I think when you start your own business, you have to know what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And I'm like a big idea person, so I also, have a lot of ideas and was pulled in a lot of different directions. So that, that was sort of a process of learning where to spend your energy and time that's going to actually deliver the most impact. And then I do think there is something about, like for me, it's listening to what my clients want, knowing that my clients are actually really different than other people who are doing similar things and their clients. And let me explain that. Like, at the time that I went out on my own, I actually had a number of colleagues that left the corporate world to do seemingly very similar things, but they went the route of starting very large agencies. And that was actually something I consciously did not want to do. I didn't want to manage a huge team. There was a lot of overhead. I didn't love that business model. So I really wanted to be more of a partner with the companies that I was working with. And it was sort of hard for me to stick with my model because it was actually really different than what other people were used to. But it was what I wanted to do. So I really had to navigate the creating what I wanted and also meeting the needs of what my clients were looking for. And I would say that that's an ongoing process in the sense that the market is changing so quickly. And it was really funny when I first started, I was like very engaged in the startup scene. I was really doing a lot of stuff, and over time I realized startups really have no money. They weren't my clients. Like, I really wanted them to be my clients. They're brilliant, smart, fun people with wonderful ideas, but if they can't pay me, that's actually not a great client. So it's really that constant process of finding what your strengths are in your business, who's the right audience, and then what is the service that we're going to pay for, and like constantly focusing on that and sort of iterating and evolving.
And it's been 5 years.
Yeah.
And you're doing alone, or do you have a team now?
So I work independently, but I do partner with people. So in some cases, I will be brought in by other people. I do have a virtualized team that I can partner with when I need to.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually like working with the clients that I like working with. I'll say this nicely, but like no assholes. Like, that's actually something that I live by, because my first year I had some really bad experiences with people that I knew, and they were not good to work with. So I really like to know who I'm working with, and choose my clients as much as they're choosing me.
Nice.
I totally agree, and I think like doing a startup is probably the #1 vehicle for personal growth. So I think it's great that you start early. And yeah, so like during this process, of course, I learned a lot. For example, like to develop a product designing thinking, to do growth marketing, to think about a lot of creative ways to acquire consumers, to activate them, like the models, a lot of things. And but what I wanted to share today is one thing that I think is the fundamental change that's happening to me because I started a business is to manage stress. I think it's a really important topic, and I think every founders or co-founders will relate with this topic. Why it's so stressful? I think it's probably one of the most stressful things to do to start a company, because for most of people who are working in a corporation, you usually have a platform to rely on. But for founders, these are the people who create the platform. So there will be a much stronger sense of insecurity, vulnerability, and uncertainty. So how to manage these feelings? Like, before I started my company, I've never really worked on these kind of self-improvement stuff outside of like being a better consultant or better analyst. So in the first initial couple of months of my running my business, I was, if something happens to my company or something like some problem occurs, I would be very emotionally avoidant to that. But over time and gradually I learned, and I started to test some things out, which I think some ways are really working out for, at least for me, so I wanted to share about this with you guys. So first is that to have a personal coach. I think personal coach really works if that person is having experienced a similar situation. Like my personal coach, she actually has 10 years of work experience in the financial industry and 5 years of running her own business. So whenever I turn to her, she will always give me very powerful recommendations and suggestions, which I find really useful. And the two other things that I learned from her is that first, always admit and accept your vulnerability. Vulnerability doesn't equal to weakness. And the second is set up boundaries in your life. And so this is the first thing that I want to share. And the second thing that I tested is that to join a startup community, to talk with the peers who are also startup founders. There are a lot of, like, to talk about their challenge and to discuss like what you want to achieve and to exchange resources. There are a lot of resources out there. For example, this startup incubator is actually called StartEd. So it supports ad tech companies like us and Leron's company. And also there's like Y Combinator's startup school. It's free. It just started last year. And you can actually virtually or physically meeting people. They're all founders around the world, and you can exchange resources and discuss about challenge every week. So I think it's quite useful. I think by doing that, you can actually build connections and sort of establish your supporting system. So, and most importantly is that you notice that you realize that you're not alone, you're not by yourself, which is quite important to me. And then the third one is to read books. I started to read a lot of great books, which helped me to think big. A recent book that I'm reading is Dare to Lead, which is written by Brené Brown. I think it's a very popular book. I bet a lot of you have already finished it. I'm just reading it. So one sentence in the first initial like chapters, which really caught my eye and turned me on, is that fear and courage are not mutually exclusive. A person can be both afraid and brave. I was like, oh. So I think these are the fundamental changes that happening to me after running a business. It's turning me from a person who was very emotionally avoidant to uncertainty and vulnerability to a person who are able to live with these emotions. So, yeah.
I think you guys might want to add something.
Oh, yes.
Very engaged.
Please pick up my little event invitations. I'm doing 2 events. One of them is stress management for founders and business professionals, because I've actually found that a lot of business people carry around a lot of stress. They live out of their heads. They don't connect with their hearts and their bodies, and they actually don't have a place. And most of my clients who I meet with one-on-one cry in my office. They don't have another space to talk about the stress that they feel from their work, the pressure. And I'm not encouraging crying, but I'm just saying that people don't have an outlet, and actually that was my experience being in the corporate world. You have to put on your armor every day, you have to show up, you go to battle. I mean, literally and sometimes, physically, it requires a certain amount of emotional courage, and we leave ourselves a lot of times when we do that, because we really have to, be and act in a way that's different than who we really are and how, what we care about. So I took notes because I was like, everything she's saying, like, that's just, it's true. And I have a group coaching program for founders, a mastermind, because I do think founders need support. I work with a coach. I've been in group coaching programs, and I think there's something about getting advice and guidance from other people, sharing, hearing from their perspective. And then the other thing is, leadership it's a constant process. So, I mean, I'll just share an example. I came out of the corporate world, the financial services type, so no, I mean, I worked in some tough environments, very sharp elbows, and I was one of the few women on many of the leadership teams that I was a part of. And, being an executive and operating in that world, you develop a certain way of treating people. And then you get out and you're on your own, and you're like, oh, people don't always do what I tell them to do because they don't have to. So, you know, you sort of need to learn how to act in a different way in different environments, and a lot of corporate places don't always value, you know, the interpersonal skills. For those of you who are introverts, I know a lot of analytical people are often very smart, but maybe shyer and quieter, and they show up and they see everything that's going on, but they may not be comfortable speaking up for themselves. And you know, I think that's also another challenge. So just sort of learning, like, what is your style? How can you show up in the world? How can you be validated and valued for your unique strengths is really important.
And around you and then.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, you know, I would say, you know, stress is, for sure, it shows that you're, you know, when you're stressed, it's good. It means you're probably going to grow out of this. You know, but I'd say that, you know, stress can manifest itself in many ways. Like when you're a founder, it's a very kind of lonely world. You know, even when announced, I was trying to meet through the incubator a lot of other founders, and it's awesome to talk to you guys because we really all are in the same situation when you start out, which is awesome because you know, if you only talk to other corporate types at your established companies, they don't really get, you know, everything you're going through. So it's really great. But still, you're always, no matter how many people you surround yourself with or support network at home, you're always kind of then left with your own idea in your head. You know, and then you know the weaknesses, you know what's not working, you hope that this would get done that fast, it didn't, and you have this doubt and this worry. So it's, you know, it's something that needs to be managed. You need to kind of realize that it is like normal. You know, this is what it is. You're exploring some new way of doing things that wasn't attempted or wasn't attempted in a particular way you're going about it. So it's, yeah, I would say that it's, you know, surprisingly lonely, but you know, it's something that can be managed, and you can kind of figure it out and just, you know, set targets that are reasonable and be happy with just learning as you go along. So as long as you keep learning, there's growth.
Yeah, I would say there's something about, it was really nice to get a steady paycheck. I really miss that. You know, like, I'd be lying if I told you I didn't miss it. And, you know, in the current environment, health insurance, you know, like, these are things that, you know, that as a solopreneur or as a founder, you really need to be thinking about. So there is something, like, I've actually been thinking about this particular topic a lot, which is, like, living with uncertainty. We live in uncertain times. I mean, I was just thinking with the government how policies that people literally counted on, and, you know, like, oh, it's executive decree, gee, that law is no longer in effect. Like, there are things, so some things are outside of our control and some things are actually within our control. So I think what we need to learn is, what are the things we actually can control that really matter to us? And then all the other things that are outside of our control, how can we adapt to when stuff is uncontrollable? Because I don't know about you, but I really like to control. Like, it, you know, that makes us feel like more a sense of mastery. And so how can we, like, ride with the changes? It's, I think that is going to be the art form that we all need to master, as much as the data analytics, or, you know, like, okay, it's the numbers, I got that, but all these other things, you know, that's important too.
Nice. And if you don't want to add anything, so I'll just go to the next question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, from my personal coach, that she said the top one priority you have to, like, stuck with is that always pay yourself as a founder, because you should be the person that you show the greatest appreciation to.
Yeah, it's also like setting boundary too, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So my next question is, like, as startups, you are all going to build a great team. Like, it's a little different for you, but for, like, you guys, you are going to build a team. Like, what kind of criteria you are looking for from the candidate? And especially for you, I have an, like, additional question is, like, as a leader from the opposite sex, right? So how do you actually, like, support and help your female employees or female colleagues or female networks to grow? Like, how do you be the allies and the champions for us? Sorry Surprise question.
No, no, it's a fair question. You know, so at Bloomberg, I always had a team in marketing, typically 3 people, 1 in each region, Hong Kong, New York, and London. And you know, there was a little bit of turnover, maybe like 8 people over the years that worked with me. And I would always hire the best people, and they just happened to always have been women. You know, just looking at resumes, interviewing, they had, you know, they were the best candidates. And what I feel like, you know, Bloomberg is very supportive of making sure that the work environment is fair and equitable. There's opportunity for everybody and a lot of mentoring. But above and beyond, you know, a big part of what I push is I always pushed the people reporting into me to, you know, push the boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like don't, you know, no matter who's on the other side of the table, because in marketing typically you have to work with many other departments. You know, it was okay to push the boundary. It was okay to, you know, to be wrong, to maybe be too aggressive and push a boundary. Like, you know, in my head I always have the idea that, you know, when a guy does it, it's very, you know, it's like, oh, he's a tough guy. You know, he's good. When a woman does it, you know, she's, you know, something else. It's I
heard you. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's, you know, so I always said, you know, then let's err on the side of pushing too hard. That's one of the things that I always told them. You know, and I always had their back because, you know, somebody on the side of the table feels like, oh, they're pushing too much. You know, they would come to me to kind of mediate, and I would bring the issue right back to the 2 people and said, this is something you guys can handle. I don't think, you know, the demands or the way something was presented is inappropriate, for example.
Yeah.
So I would say that, you know, let people, you know, push their agenda and whatever we needed to get done aggressively and back them up.
Nice. And I also heard like one little thing is Bloomberg is having the no pay gap, right? Like the transparency, like people actually know each other, how much each other is making. Is that true?
No.
Okay. Okay, that's rumor confirmed. But I heard like you guys have some like no pay gap rule or.
I mean, I truly believe that the company is legitimately doing everything it can to address that. Like, you know, the imprint of Mike Bloomberg in the company is very real. You know. Almost all the profits that are left over after investing back in the business go to charity. Something like half a billion dollars a year, every year, gets added to what's being given out. So it's, you know, so I believe that he's trying to solve like all the world's problems, including the pay gap, and doing it very seriously. It's definitely taken incredibly seriously with a lot of very purposeful. I guess like cultural elements built in, like, you know, from anything from training to having a huge support network to of people for women to and even like HR policies, of course, that match that and allow people to grow.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, anything that can be reasonably done is being done in that company.
I honestly think like Michael Bloomberg should run for president. So,
He looked at the data and he decided not to. So
a very educated decision.
yes.
Well, so I do hire. I have a virtual assistant. I have interns that work for me. I have business partners who execute on behalf of my clients. And I've also, you know, built and managed teams for companies I've worked in and for my clients. So I've structured marketing organizations. And if you're interested, you can give me a business card. I actually have a little worksheet you can fill in that gives you some guidelines. But what I think is most important is you've got to figure out what you value. And by values, I mean like what is it that you want in the people that you work with? What are the things that are important in terms of work qualities? So for example, for me, communication is a big one. Reliability and consistency. There's something about positive attitude. Like, I just want to work with people that are really excited about what they're doing. I don't like working with downers. It just doesn't, you know, it doesn't work for me. And then the other thing is, all right, what is the skills that you need for the job? And then you sort of go like this, okay, when you start meeting candidates, do they have the skills and are they a fit culturally? Because on the one hand, I am a supporter of, you know, the blind hiring. Like, I think you should hire for certain jobs people that have the skills that are needed and not look at their name and where they came from and things like that. but at the same time, if your work requires you to collaborate very closely with people, either in face-to-face situations or even working virtually, communication to me is actually essential, because otherwise it's sort of hard to align an organization around shared goals in order to execute effectively if those people can't communicate. And I guess one of the other things I would say is, when you're hiring, like, what is it you really need? So I hear this from a lot of founders who are non-technical. Oh, I need a technical co-founder. And then I say, why? There are lots of technical people that you could hire, that you could direct. I mean, I'm very impressed that you learn the technology skills yourself, because that's just amazing. But I do think that a lot of, and I've seen this, I coach a lot of female founders, they feel like insecure, like, I don't understand the technology, and so they're afraid that they're not going to be credible if they don't have someone with them who's got the technical chops. Listen, in some cases that may be true, but I don't think it's always a given that you have to hire someone for what you lack. You can get that advice through strategic advisors and other people that work with you. That's why consultants can be hired, certain functions can be outsourced. So I think it's really important to think very strategically about who it is that you really need on your team, whether you need them full-time, whether they can be consultants or on an outsourced basis, and how that comes together.
Nice. And Faye, you just hired your first full-time, so.
Yeah, I just hired my first one over there, and also Mary is our very qualified intern. She did a lot. She's been doing a lot, and so I think because we are constantly hiring, and of course we prefer someone who has experience, who are passionate about the career education industry, and also it's better if you have experience designing like curriculum before. But these are just like adds-on value. But what I really care is whether you are prepared for the startup world, because it's quite different from your expectation if you wanted to go to a corporate world. Like, you don't expect to have a concrete job description because it doesn't exist. Like, you have to do a lot of things that are not included in it, so basically everything. And also, for young people who are in their early stage of their career, it actually takes a great courage to join a very early stage startup company. So if you are ready and you know all the nuances involved behind, then I think you are already much more readier than any other people. So if you're in that status, talk with me.
Nice.
I would just add to this, I think it's really important to know for yourself what environment you're going to excel in, because it is a fact. Not everyone is going to excel in a startup environment. But for somebody who's early in their career, wearing a lot of hats and doing everything, like, that can be amazing experience. But if you're someone who wants more structure and something defined, like I've seen a lot of people that are in smaller environments and they feel stifled because there's really nowhere to go if there's someone who's right ahead of you. And so you really need to figure out, do you want to work in a company that's growing? So then you have the opportunity to expand, and just for those of you who are looking for work, you want to look for the right environment as much as the people who are hiring.
Right. And we really brought your colleague here. Yeah.
So I mean, it's as far as so I would say a couple of things. Number one, is working with your weaknesses. Yeah, you could. It's easier than ever now through sites like Fiverr and Upwork to find people for very specific tasks, like technical issues. For example, I learned how to make the apps, but maintaining the leaderboards on a database was not something I wanted to invest time in. So I used Upwork. I found somebody who could do it and spec'd it out and got it done. So you could augment your skills. And as far as what you might want to focus on, so I knew, or I assumed, starting the business, I would have to iterate a lot with the product. So I couldn't start a business until I could control that. That's kind of the core proposition of business, is building these games and adjusting them until I get it right. So I couldn't outsource that right off the bat. And even though I have 12 years of leading marketing teams, I actually outsource marketing needs that I have, because that's stuff that I can, know how to manage other people doing. They could do it, and then I could focus on the product development. And now that I have a product, I need to switch back, and I'm focusing back on discovering the marketing channels that would work for this product.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, there's a lot of resources, and you can hop from one side to the other.
You're very resourceful.
I mean, you have to be. Yeah, like I wouldn't, like something, everything you take for granted, like the emailing service that your company provides. Now, you got to figure that out.
Yeah.
So everything is.
Everything is a choice.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, the thing that just works is that you keep showing up and you keep tackling issues, and lo and behold, they work out.
Yeah.
You choose something eventually. It works or it doesn't work. You find something else. It's not the end of the world. It just every day, you just the issues resolve or don't resolve themselves, and you just keep showing up, and amazing things happen.
Nice. I'll ask my one last question, and it's your time, and you can ask questions to the panel as well. So my last question is just like share with the guests like one thing that's a success story or learning, like anything you wanna just be like sharing this with our members in Women in Analytics. Yeah. Like your own success story, your company success story, or your learning.
Yeah. So let me share a good, like a learning, which is, I'm calling schools, trying to get a hold of principals, emailing them. I finally get a hold of somebody whose school has a 50% fail rate, right, for this exam. They cycle principals every 2 years. I talked to her. She loves the product, loves the idea. I had it validated by a professor that shows that it works. Everybody's excited, and then she says, okay, come in next week, let's demo it. And then I can't get a hold of her anymore. Because principals are really super busy. So I just have to be persistent with that. But it's kind of like this shock when you think you connect something and it doesn't work. But you forget that in sales, and every one of the salespeople that I worked with, this is the reality. So you kind of like, you have connections, I need to develop better tactics to keep the lead warm, if you will. You can't just take for granted one great conversation. So I would say that was like a very recent lesson that, that I'm kind of like, at first it was like painful, but then it's like, okay, that's great to know. Like it's not going to be done in a phone call no matter how excited they are.
Yeah.
I need to have better follow-up and develop better tools to engage with these people.
Yeah, sales #1, just be persistent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Eight touch points often before you get to your decision.
Lenora, if you want to share anything.
Yeah, I was going to share, like I work with a lot of business professionals that are looking to do something better, different, and I happened at one period of time, I had 3 clients, all of whom got new opportunities where they were earning significantly more, and what I found most interesting is that one of the women had been a very high-profile media person, and she had then she had left to work in a startup and done different things, but she really was not happy in her opportunity, and I was able to help her find a completely new job leading a team as a manager and executive in a public relations agency. So she left industries altogether, was earning $100,000 more than she had been earning previously in an area that she never would have considered, but through our work together, she was able to realize what she really wanted from a job and then what would be the best place for her. And so it is very gratifying when people can sort of, they're miserable and unhappy where they are, and I get to see them end up in a place that's much happier, a better fit, and more satisfying for them.
My learning is that don't always listen to VC's bullshit, because a lot of VC, they want to...
VC is like venture capitalists.
Yes,
Yeah.
so they're bullshitting all the time. I'm not saying like every VC bullshitting, but it always happens. So if someone tell you that you cannot do that, you cannot do this, it don't make sense, it's just from their personal perspective, and they don't even establish a company before. So always trust in yourself, and always put who you want to be, what kind of product you want to create, and how you want to connect with the world in first place, instead of like how I gonna make like 5 billion money or those kind of things. These kind of things are actually what VC want you to do because they want to earn money from you. So this is kind of a lesson that I learned from talking with a lot of VC. I will never ever become who they want me to be. I just wanted to like do the business like my way.
Can I share a little story? Like Faye once told me, like one venture capitalist, obviously a man, said like, "You're too pretty. You're not a startup owner.
Oh my God.
You're too pretty to actually be working on startups."
It's not, the original sentence is not "you're too pretty." What he said is that you have too much choice. He said like, usually, maybe it's based on his experience, that usually the successful founders or female founders are usually those who have like no better choice, who are either, you know, some miserable things happening to you, like divorced, or like, you know, he's being like super political correct. So I think that happens a lot in China, like China's VC. So
Yeah, thank you. And it's your time now. If you guys want to ask any question, just raise your hand. I think we're like closing enough. We don't need a microphone or anything.
I have a
Sure.
question for Faye. How did you meet your coach, and did you work with the first person?
So there's some background information. So for a lot of like Chinese people, we have WeChat. I'm not sure whether you know that. So there are a lot of like brand official account on WeChat, and she also established hers on WeChat. So I actually grabbed her a lot of her like great articles on her WeChat channel, and I think because my major is in psychology, so I really picky on whether a person can, you know, like convey this message that makes sense to me in terms of psychology, like human development, all those kind of things. And I think she is very professional, so that's why I started like contact with her, and I heard it from her that she actually has this like coaching services. It's super expensive. It's like $2,000 for 6 hours, lasting 3 months. But I think it deserves the money because she is very professional and powerful and caring. She has certain like psychology background, so she understands you and build very good connection with you, and like just give me the unconditional acceptance, and like tells me a lot of. She will never tell me what to choose or what to do. She will just letting me to decide. But whenever I have a decision or whenever I have a doubt in myself, I talk with her, and she will ask why you think about that, and can you think about that again? Those kind of things. I think it's really powerful. Yeah.
Lenora, if that's the capacity you were
Yeah, I'm happy to address the question. I mean, I think there are a lot of different coaches. There are career coaches. They're really great if you're not clear on what you want to do. They might give you a battery of tests to get clarity on your skills. There are life coaches who focus more on elements of your personal life and greater fulfillment. So I think the most important thing is to find someone that understands you, that you can relate to, that you feel like they sort of see you and can support you. And what I would say is, with my clients, I really try and understand what their goals are and help them to get clear. And in most cases, what I see is there are some people who have a vision, they know what they want, but they're just having a really challenging time getting there. So they don't understand what it is that's getting in the way. And then there are other folks who maybe are unhappy and they're frustrated, but they're having a hard time creating the vision. And that's because they have some other blocks that are preventing them from really going after what they want. And so in whatever the situation is, in some cases it's dealing with sort of the emotional, psychological issues. In other cases it's just like business skills. Okay, you want to be in a leadership role, you got to build your network, you've got to understand what the requirements are, you've got to enhance your presentation skills. So I really work with clients wherever it is. I've worked with CEOs and executives of large teams, and I've worked with people early stage. So depending on where you are in your professional development and what you need, that's the sort of coach that you want to work with. I don't believe it's like one size fits all, and I think you really want to find someone that you can be comfortable with. And I do offer a complimentary 30-minute call. I did one with Faye and her team. So I'm happy to use that strategy session if anyone is interested in learning about sort of exploring what your challenges are. And I really use that opportunity to sort of give you some feedback and make some suggestions. And then if it's a good fit for coaching, great. I'm happy to talk about that more. If not, you probably should have conversations with a few different people to find out who's the best fit for you. You're not going to grab the first person you meet and marry them, right? You kind of like to date. So, actually I also believe there are different coaches for different things. So in some cases it may make sense to work with more than one person depending on what your needs are. So a lot of my clients I work with as a business coach, and maybe they have like a personal therapist that they work with or something else. Some of my clients, I do a lot of deeper work. I'm sort of formally trained in a somatic psychotherapeutic approach. So some clients, I'm like their business therapist and their personal therapist. Wow. So it really sort of depends on what someone is looking for and what they need and what they're comfortable with.
If you don't want to add anything, we'll go to that question.
I mean, maybe I'll add something just about general advice or feedback on like your ideas. In that, it's good to get a lot of varied opinions. Everybody will give you an opinion and they'll make it sound like they're representing the world. So you need to just realize they're really representing themselves in the frame that they're in that day, maybe that moment, right? So you need to get data points from people, the same person maybe multiple times, and or from as much variety that you could bear. And I would say if you have a good idea and you get a lot of this is feedback that's positive, that's also not that helpful. It's good to keep going until you find somebody that doesn't get it, and then try to figure out like why, and then that's where you'll improve. So it's in terms of feedback, don't always get a lot of data points, and be honest with yourself.
And I just wanted to comment on something Faye said. I mean, I think the hardest thing is for us to trust ourselves, and that's getting to that point sometimes can take a process. And I also believe that free advice is worth that. It's not always some people can give you great input, but the truth is if you really want someone who has your back and can support you, you need to pay for expertise. I mean, like I said, I hire people that are great at what they do to help me with the areas that I need support around.
Any other questions? Yes, you go first. Yeah.
So being entrepreneurs who are in STEM, what advice would you give to someone young who's starting off in STEM and entrepreneurship?
Well, which one do you direct it to?
To anyone who
cool.
I guess feels like they can answer.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not as young as you are, but a lot of people ask me like why you started your business at such an early stage of your career. Are you think about whether if it fails, are you gonna go back to the job market or those kind of type of thing? But to me, the reason behind starting a company is quite straightforward. It's just finding out a problem and being fascinated by the process of figuring out a solution to that problem, at least to me. So I think that's basically what triggers me to start my company. But I think, because I just read an article from Forbes, and there are more and more people who are starting their companies younger and younger. Like a lot of high school students participate in like entrepreneurship programs, but you're even one step further, you start your own company. I think it's really great. And one concern that I previously had is that if I don't follow my career path in a certain vertical, for example, data analytics, will I lose those kind of skills that make me can stand on this world? But the answer is no. If you can create something from scratch, like from 0 to 1, then you actually have more than one techniques. You have more than one specialties. You can live so good on this world. So I don't feel insecure on this problem anymore, but it was a valid question, I think, before, so that's my advice.
Sure, if you guys want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think entrepreneurship is a skill that can be learned. So a lot of, some of the, like people my age, look here and say, wow, that's awesome. You have the entrepreneurship gene. You're gonna do great. And but it's really something that you learn through trial and error. It's really problem solving. And like I said, it's creative problem solving on a big scale because you're on your own and trying to figure out how to make things work, how to get more people to join a club, how to get people engaged. So I think the more experience you could get, the more successes and failures you could have. No matter how early you start, the sooner the better. Then that's awesome. So the idea is keep taking risks. Like if you find something that works, try to make it better. Don't just let it keep going because it works.
The only thing that's coming up for me is, be clear on your vision. Are you doing this because you really want to create something big? Because if you do, go for it. But if you think that really you want to do this because you want to get the experience, that's okay too. I just think sometimes knowing what your desired outcome is, that's going to help you make the choices around how you structure things and where you focus your energy.
Thanks. And Will, I think you raised your hand. Yes.
I mean, I got a question for all of you. I mean, I wonder what is your secret sauce to drive business growth? Because, during my study and training at business school, I had several chances to work with with startup companies and companies with small size. And I think for all the questions that I help them to solving, for example, like customer acquisition or customer satisfaction, they ultimately speaking, they can all link to one final goal, that is to drive the business growth. So I wonder, what techniques are you using to drive business growth, or what is your advice?
Okay, I'll start.
Sure.
So I think first is you really have to have a good product to start with. Before your product is achieving its good status, do not grow it, because otherwise people will know it's not a good product and they will never come back again. And the second is to have a product designing thinking or product mindset. So to really do test and learn. Like there are a lot of strategies for you to acquire, to activate, to retention, to referral, to revenue, generate revenue. There are a lot of things, techniques involved in all of these steps. So what we have to do is that test everything that you came up with, and also be mindful to record the result of it, so that in the long run you can be sure which one works in what situation, and which one doesn't work, and you don't want to try it anymore. And the last thing is that different companies do things differently. There are some companies that do not quite. So every company has its competitors, right? We also have our competitors. I think what really stands us out is that we genuinely connect with our consumers, and we genuinely listen to what they want, and we are very honest to them. I think this is really a very powerful, you can call it PR, call it communication, but I think it's the kind of a core quality of your business. So.
I have a service business, so I'm less focused on a product per se. But for me, I don't believe in growth for growth's sake. I mean, I think there's a place for that. But for me, it's about what is it that I'm trying to grow and how, and what do I want my business to look like. So there are some people that only want to make millions and millions of dollars. That to me is to what end? I want to build something meaningful. I want to make an impact in the world. I want to really help as many people create change as I can and do it with quality. And so that's what I use to guide the choices that I make. So I don't, that's the difference between the startup tech culture and what VCs who are funding you are looking for versus, again, having your own business and doing it in a different way. So I don't think every business is meant to, grow 15% or more a year. That's just not realistic. But yeah, so that's just a different point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's tough. It's as a new startup, I haven't figured out what's the most effective way to get this product out there. So I would say that it definitely feels like the combination of a product, who you're selling to, and even like the time and space that you're selling that particular solution, all matter, and they just have to be iterated. Like I said, it's a whole other product. The getting traction for your product is a whole other product. Should be treated as a product and therefore iterated. With experiments, small experimentations, release it, see what people think, scale up if it makes sense. So it's really, it needs to be systematic. If like I said, you build something you think people want, they should just hear you out and give you a shot. It doesn't really work that way, or for this situation it doesn't, so you got to figure out other avenues.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say again, like for me, it's about values. There's a corporate attorney who's actually proposing now that corporations, as they're configured, are actually only seeking profit, and they don't care about the impact on all their stakeholders. And there is going to be a shift, hopefully, and I hope it continues, fundamentally where organizations actually think about the impact of what they do on everything. The environment, their employees, their investors, their clients, right? I mean, I've worked at companies where actually they didn't care about their clients. And they got sued for it, they paid millions of dollars in settlements, right? So I think that the environment is shifting, and I think that hopefully it will be more in alignment with values that care about impact. So that's what I think is important, and those are the companies that I want to be working with.
Yes. And Laurent, you grow the company in both ways, like in the marketing route and also in the sales route. Like, do you actually see a difference here, or what's the biggest adjustment do you have when you are shifting your roles?
Yeah, so it's there's different phases as well. So maybe at first it makes sense to do more digital marketing to get a general awareness. There's different phases, and then using salespeople when you're working on bigger contracts, right, versus just seeding the market. There's just so many variables there. For Bloomberg, like I said, it was an established channel of a salesperson, but even in that, you had to arm them with different pitches, you had to provide them different collateral, you still have to tell a story well, and that was, again, my full-time job, so it's not like, whatever you can focus on. You should, in other words, identify what works and then optimize it, but always, always, always try to experiment outside the realm of what seems to work. Like always look for, well, okay, that worked for 10 years, but what about content marketing again? Like we tried it. I think there's a story of how Sprite got invented, which was, I forget if it was Pepsi or Coca-Cola, but they tried to compete against 7-Up. It's hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. And they tried, they did a caffeinated clear soda. It was a failure. So everybody said, okay, we're not doing clear sodas at Pepsi. And this new CMO came in and said, with a fresh mind, said, why, this is a $100 million opportunity, let's try again. And they were all up in arms, and then Sprite came about as making them a lot of money. So sometimes something that didn't work a couple of years ago for whatever factors doesn't mean it's not going to work now. Yeah. And you just have to be almost naive and try it again. It's something slightly different.
Nice. Cool. And any other questions, or we can? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I have a question about the uncertainty that you mentioned about. So for startup founders, you always face this uncertainty about whether my startup will live or die tomorrow. So how do you deal with it when you are facing your employees? Because for startups, they're usually a small team. They work very closely with you. So are you very honest with them to tell them the risks and uncertainties that you are facing, the company is facing, or are you just hide it from them to be very confident about the future of your startup?
First, I don't think we're at that stage, because I think we're gonna live, and but I try to imagine when a company is facing some sort of difficulty. I would think nobody can really tell whether your company is gonna die or not, because even though you feel like the company cannot stand anymore, but just to give it a try and to see, sometimes it just not grow, or sometimes it's just you are kind of in a static status, but that doesn't mean that it will die. Try something different, maybe something will happen. So I will say be honest with your employees, but depends on what situation you're in, because I don't really know. If it were me, I will be honest to my employees, and I will be like be realistic, but also be optimistic, because I believe good things will happen if you try the good method. So.
Yeah, I was going to say I can answer this from two perspectives. As a leader, I think you always want to have the vision, and you want to really, you need to be the cheerleader for the business because you're the one who's driving its growth ultimately. That being said, you actually have to be practical and realistic, and if your business is not doing well, then you're not going to be served by keeping employees that you can't afford. Right, so so in some cases, this is where you have to make the hard decisions, and you either let people go, or you sort of do need to do that. Sadly, in my 5.5 years, half of my clients that were startups or even companies that had been around, but they were sort of early stage growth, they're out of business. And a lot of businesses do fail. That is the reality and the fact. And I will tell you, actually, several of them, I could see that they were going to fail. It was actually quite obvious. I mean, one in particular, they had a lot of funding. They hired I built out a marketing function. They hired a marketing person right away. I was like, you don't need a full-time marketing person. You don't have a product yet. But they were spending more money than they had income, which is actually, depending on what environment you came in from, that really matters. So if I could give you one piece of advice, I would say, spend less rather than over, you gotta match your expenses to where you are, because you run a risk if you're overextending that, then, the bottom is gonna fall out. So, it's sort of a tricky process, but, you don't want to go the route of, oh my God, you don't want to show that you're falling apart. This is where, as a founder, you need outside counsel to help guide you and help you stay confident and get more clarity. Because it is very stressful, and I had a founder I dealt with who her business was struggling, and she couldn't go to her investors, she couldn't go to her advisory board because they had a vested interest. Their money was in the company. So, sometimes, depending on what's at stake, it can be really helpful to have unbiased outside perspective to help you get clarity, and then for you to make the decision about how you want to show up with your team in a way that you can really communicate what is going to be most helpful for you, the organization, and them.
Yeah, this got me thinking about just risk in general. There's a perception that entrepreneurship is super risky. Oh God, you lose your job. I think a lot of people that work in the field kind of know that. So they know that it's your job as the CEO to be positive, and if there's 1% chance of success, you keep going. Because if you say you're not, then that's it. You don't need to even keep going. You just admit that there is no, and it's over, right? So and the people working for you should expect that this is the nature of the business. But then I'm also thinking, in Bloomberg, a very established company with great profit margins, there's no certainty there either. There's always, the moment you're relaxed at your job for a year, then a new boss comes in. I had 5 CEOs over 12 years of my division, not the brokerage division I was a CMO at, and every single one of them wanted to get rid of marketing as a function. They wanted to, they said, oh, it's all salespeople. Why do I need a marketing, people? So I had to repitch it every time, negotiate, justify the team, a lot of stress, right? Because these are people that are, in a weird way, if you are a startup, they'll be like, oh, okay, we don't need marketing more, guys, we failed, let's move on. But these are people that are salaried, and I had to kind of make sure they adjusted their roles correctly to be relevant to this new, regime, if you will. So I say it feels like there's just as much stress any way you look at it. You choose if that stress is too much. You could have easily, after the 4th CEO, be like, okay, nobody wants marketing, I'm out of here. But no, I actually enjoyed that. I enjoyed justifying it. There was a good reason for it. They just didn't understand it until they saw it. So it's kind of, the risk is always there. When you're not, maybe you take more risk, but it's really kind of the same. You still put in the weekends if you want to be successful in corporate America. You're going to put in weekends, of course, as a startup.
Yeah. I think we are
good on time. So thank you so much for coming here. And we still have the room, right? We should still have the room. And you guys can just stay and chat with each other. It's very nice to meet you here at this event. We are also having another one in the end of August. It's August the 23rd. So you're welcome to that one too. But thank you so much for coming here. Thank you.